The moment I walked into my sister-in-law's kitchen and saw my 9-year-old daughter standing at the center of the room, I knew something was wrong. Zoe's face was pale. Her shoulders were pulled up to her ears the way they get when she's trying to make herself smaller. And every adult in the room was laughing. I didn't understand what they were laughing at, not yet. Then I saw her hands. She was holding her journal, the one with the little brass lock I'd given her for her birthday. The pages were open, and my mother-in-law was reading from them out loud in a mocking sing-song voice. Dear Diary, I hate when Daddy forgets to pick me up because it makes me feel like I'm invisible. More laughter from the room. My brother-in-law's wife. I'll call her my sister-in-law, though she never once felt like family, was filming it on her phone. That wide grin spread across her face like she'd just pulled off the greatest prank in the world. I'm not a confrontational person. I want to make that clear before I tell you the rest of this story, because what I did next surprised even me. I crossed that kitchen in 4 steps, put my hand flat over that journal, and looked my mother-in-law dead in the eyes. Close it, I said. She laughed, actually laughed. Oh, come on, Zoe doesn't mind, we're just having fun. She's so dramatic, honestly, takes after you. My daughter was not having fun. My daughter was crying so hard her whole body was shaking and she hadn't made a single sound because she'd learned early on in this family that making noise only made things worse. This is the story of what happened that afternoon and everything that came after it, and I'm still angry about it. I want you to know that up front. I'm not going to pretend I found some peaceful resolution that made it all okay. Some things don't get okay, but I did get justice. Partial, imperfect, hard-won justice. And I'm going to tell you exactly how. My husband's family has always been a lot. I say that with zero irony. When I met my husband Curtis back when we were both 27, I thought his big, boisterous family was charming. Sunday dinners at his parents' house in Glendale. Everyone talking over everyone else. His mom Doreen pressing food on you before you'd even sat down. His dad quiet in the corner with a beer, nodding at everything his wife said. And then there was his sister, Megan. Megan is 3 years older than Curtis, which made her about 34 when all of this happened. She married her husband Brent 6 years ago, and I genuinely tried to like her. For years I tried. I brought her coffee when I knew she'd had a hard week. I remembered her kids' birthdays. I showed up to her daughter's dance recitals even when Curtis couldn't make it because of work. I did all the things you're supposed to do when you marry into a family and want to belong. But Megan had decided she didn't like me before I ever said a word to her. Curtis told me once, early on, that Megan had wanted him to end up with a girl from their hometown, someone she'd grown up with, someone whose whole life was legible to her. I was from Phoenix. I had a degree in graphic design. I wore my hair natural and loud and took up space in a way that apparently made Megan uncomfortable. She never said any of that, of course. She was always careful. Always just on the edge of mean in a way that let her claim she was joking. Oh, your hair looks so big today, she'd say at Christmas. Those jeans are a bold choice, she'd say at Easter. Always with this little smile, always in front of people, always too quiet for anyone else to really catch it. I told Curtis about it early on. He sighed and said Megan was just like that. She didn't mean anything by it. I told his mother once, years in, when Megan made a comment about me not cooking real food at a dinner where I brought a dish I was genuinely proud of. Doreen patted my hand and said Megan was protective of Curtis and I just needed to give her time. I gave her 7 years. 7 years of swallowed comments. 7 years of arriving at family events already braced. 7 years of watching Megan talk over me, exclude me from conversations, and refer to Zoe, my child, my daughter, as kind of sensitive, and a little much whenever Zoe did something Megan found inconvenient, like cry at a movie, or refuse to eat something she didn't like, or just exist in a space that Megan wanted to dominate. Zoe was 9 when it happened. She was in 4th grade. She loved marine biology, specifically octopuses, with a seriousness that made her teachers smile. She drew them constantly. She'd give you a 20-minute lecture on octopus intelligence if you made the mistake of asking. She was funny and specific and deeply, easily hurt, and she'd learned to keep most of herself tucked away at family gatherings because somehow, without anyone saying it out loud, She'd figured out that Megan didn't like her. The journal had been my idea. I'd read something about how writing helps kids process big emotions, and Zoe had started having some anxiety around school that year. Just ordinary fourth-grade stuff, but it weighed on her. The journal had a little brass lock and a tiny key that Zoe kept on a ribbon around her wrist like a talisman. She wrote in it every night. I never read it. That was the whole point. It was hers. She'd brought it to the Thanksgiving gathering because she'd wanted something to do during the boring parts, and because I hadn't thought to tell her not to. Why would I? She was 9. She was allowed to have private things. Megan's daughter, who is 11 and has learned her mother's habits early, found it. I still don't know exactly how it happened. One minute the kids were upstairs. The next Zoe was in the kitchen holding her open journal while Doreen read from it out loud to the room. I learned later from Curtis's cousin, who pulled me aside afterward, that Megan had helped her daughter get the lock open. That she'd been the one to suggest reading it to the group. That she'd thought it was funny. Just a joke. Those words. I stood in that kitchen with my hand over Zoe's journal, and I looked around the room. Curtis was there. He'd gone silent and pale. Brent was laughing. Doreen had this defensive look settling over her face that I recognized. It's the look she gets right before she says something that makes everything your fault. Megan was still filming. "Stop recording," I said. My voice came out surprisingly steady. "Oh, relax, it's not a big deal," Megan said. "Stop recording." She lowered her phone maybe 2 inches and kept that smile on her face. I picked up Zoe's journal, took my daughter's hand, and walked out of the kitchen. We went down the hall. We went into the half bathroom near the front door, and I locked it behind us, and I got down on my knees and I held my daughter for a long time while she cried. She didn't ask why they did it. She was 9, but she'd already understood something about Megan that had taken me years to fully accept, that some people do cruel things not because they're confused or hurting or acting without thinking, but because cruelty makes them feel powerful. Zoe had just never expected it to happen to her this directly. "Can we go home?" she asked. "Yes," I said, "right now." I found Curtis in the living room. He looked relieved to see me, which made something in my chest go cold. He was relieved because he'd been hoping I would handle it, which meant he hadn't. "We're leaving," I said. "Okay," he said immediately. He knew the whole thing had been wrong and he hadn't stopped it. "We'll come back to that." We were at the front door putting on our coats when Doreen appeared. And this is where I want to pause, because I need you to understand what she said next is the thing I am least able to forgive, even now. She looked at Zoe, this tiny 9-year-old with tear-stained cheeks, who had just had her most private thoughts mocked in front of a room full of adults. And she said, "You know, Zoe, if you're going to write things down, you have to expect that people might read them. You can't be so sensitive." I put my body between Doreen and my daughter, physically stepped in front of her. "Don't talk to my child," I said. Doreen drew herself up. "I was just trying to help her understand. You don't get to talk to my child right now. We're leaving." We left. In the car, Zoe fell asleep before we hit the highway. I sat in the passenger seat and stared at the road and didn't say anything to Curtis for 40 minutes. He didn't say anything to Curtis for 40 minutes. He didn't say anything to me either. When we got home and got Zoe into bed, I came back downstairs and I sat across from my husband at the kitchen table and I said, "Tell me what you're going to do." He said he would talk to Megan. I asked what he would say. He said he would tell her it was too far. I asked if that was all. He said he didn't know what else I wanted. I want you to know that I love my husband. I love him genuinely and imperfectly and for real. But that night, watching him struggle to find words for why his sister reading our daughter's private journal out loud to a laughing room full of adults was wrong. That night, I understood something about our marriage that I hadn't fully reckoned with. He had spent his whole life managing Megan's behavior by minimizing it. He had no language for naming it as abuse. He genuinely wasn't sure how bad it was because his whole family had spent 40 years convincing each other that Megan was just like that. I slept in the guest room that night, not because I was punishing him, because I couldn't be next to anyone who wasn't as angry as I was. The next morning, I called my best friend, who is a paralegal. and I asked her what my options were. She asked me if Megan had posted any of the video. I went cold. I hadn't even thought about that. I checked Megan's social media immediately. She hadn't posted it yet. But I didn't know that she wouldn't. And my friend told me something I hadn't known. In California, recording a minor without parental consent and then sharing that recording publicly could constitute a violation of COPPA and state privacy laws. And reading a child's private diary aloud for the purpose of humiliating her in front of others could be considered a form of emotional abuse, depending on the context and severity. You might not get criminal charges, my friend said carefully, but you have options, and you need to document everything right now while it's fresh. So I did. I wrote down everything I remembered, time-stamped. I texted Curtis's cousin, the one who'd pulled me aside, and asked if she'd be willing to write down what she'd seen. She said yes without hesitating. I asked if anyone else had been uncomfortable. She said she thought Brent's brother had looked uncomfortable too, but she wasn't sure he'd say anything. I asked her to ask him. He said yes. 2 witnesses, a detailed personal account, and the knowledge that Megan still had that video on her phone. I called a family law attorney that week, not a divorce attorney, I want to be clear, I wasn't there yet. I was still hoping Curtis would come around, and I asked about my options. The attorney told me that if Megan posted that video, we could pursue a cease and desist immediately and potentially seek damages for the emotional harm to a minor. She also told me that if I wanted to report the incident to Child Protective Services as emotional abuse, I could, though given that it was a one-time witnessed incident at a family event, it was unlikely to result in intervention. What would have the most impact? I asked. A letter from my office, she said, followed by a formal demand for the deletion of all recordings, with the threat of civil action if any content is shared. It cost me $400 for the consultation and the letter, the most worthwhile $400 I have ever spent. Megan received that letter on a Monday. By Tuesday afternoon, I had a text from Curtis saying his mother was calling me vindictive. By Wednesday, I had a text from Megan herself, the first time she had ever directly contacted me about anything, saying that I was destroying the family over a joke, that Zoe needed to learn to take things less seriously, and that I should be ashamed of myself. I screenshot every single message, then I called my attorney and forwarded them. She sent a follow-up letter noting that Megan's communications constituted continued harassment. I want to be honest about Curtis during this time because he deserves neither more credit nor less than he earned. He was, for about 2 weeks, genuinely torn. He kept trying to find a middle position, some version of this where he could acknowledge that Megan went too far, while also not fully condemning her. He suggested family mediation. He suggested I call his mother and clear the air. He suggested that maybe we'd all feel better if we just moved past it. I told him that moving past it wasn't something I was willing to do without accountability. I told him that Zoe had started sleeping with her journal under her pillow because she was afraid someone would take it. That she'd asked me twice if the video was going to end up on the internet. That she'd said in a very small voice one night when I was tucking her in, "Mommy, why does Aunt Megan hate me?" I told Curtis all of that and I watched him sit very still. "I don't know what to do," he said finally. "I know," I said. "I know you don't, but I need you to figure it out. Because I'm not bringing Zoe into that house again until something changes." He went to see Megan alone without telling me. I found out from his cousin. He was there for 2 hours. I don't know everything that was said. What I know is that he came home looking like something had been wrung out of him, and he sat across from me and said, "She's not sorry. She thinks you're overreacting and she's furious about the lawyer. Mom agrees with her." "Okay," I said. "I didn't know it was that bad," he said. And I think he meant Megan. The full picture of her that he'd been softening his whole life. I think I've been making excuses for her forever and I didn't realize how much it... I'm sorry for not stepping in. I'm really sorry. For not stepping in. I'm really sorry. I believed him. I still do. What we had to work out after that is our own business and our own story, and it's ongoing and it's real. What matters for this story is that Curtis stopped going to Megan's. He stopped showing up to events where she'd be. He told his mother clearly, for the first time in his life, that there would be consequences for how she treated his wife and daughter. Doreen did not take that well. She called me 3 times over the following month, each call a slightly different variation of the same script. I was tearing the family apart. I was raising a child who couldn't handle the real world. I had weaponized a lawyer against her daughter over nothing. On the 3rd call, she said something that I'm still not going to repeat here about my parenting, that I wrote down and added to the file I was keeping. I didn't respond to any of the calls. I let them go to voicemail and I saved them all. Megan, to her credit, and I genuinely mean this, it's the one thing I credit her for, never posted the video. Maybe the legal letter scared her. Maybe some part of her understood she'd gone too far. I'll never know, and I don't particularly need to know. What I know is that the video doesn't exist publicly and I can live with that. What we got, formally, Megan signed a document confirming she had deleted all recordings and agreeing not to contact Zoe or me directly without Curtis present. It wasn't criminal charges. It wasn't the public reckoning some people might have wanted, but it was a legal record that what she did happened, that it was serious enough to require documentation, that she had agreed in writing that it was done. My attorney told me that was more than most people got. I tried to feel satisfied with that. I didn't entirely. I won't lie to you. What actually helped was something I hadn't expected. About 6 weeks after Thanksgiving, I got a DM on Instagram from an account I didn't recognize. It took me a second to realize it was from Megan's daughter, who I'll call by her first initial, K. She was 11. She'd found me because she follows a friend of mine who posts about marine biology, which Zoe had talked to her about once. The message said, "I'm really sorry about what happened to Zoe. I told my mom it wasn't funny, but she didn't listen. I just wanted Zoe to know I don't think it was okay." I sat with my phone in my hands for a long time. Then I called Zoe over and showed her the message. Zoe read it twice. Then she said, "Kay is nicer than her mom." "Yes," I said, "she is." "Can I write back?" I thought about it. Then I said yes, she could write back, and I'd sit next to her while she did. Zoe typed, "Thank you for telling me. That means a lot. I hope you're doing okay." And then she added an octopus emoji because that's who my daughter is. I don't know what Kay's life looks like inside that house. I hope she has enough good things in it that she can stay as clear-eyed as she was in that message. Here's what I want to say to anyone who might be in the early stages of something like this. When you're still standing in the kitchen with your hand on your child's journal and the room is still laughing and you're trying to figure out if what you're seeing is really as bad as it feels. It's as bad as it feels. Family relationships don't grant people the right to humiliate your child. Calling something a joke doesn't make it one. "She's too sensitive" is not a diagnosis, it's a deflection. And you are allowed, you are required, if you're the parent, to take it seriously, even if no one else in the room does. Even if the people who should be on your side aren't yet. Even if doing so costs you things you didn't want to lose. I lost Thanksgiving. I lost Christmas that year. I lost the comfortable fiction that my husband's family was a place my daughter was safe. Those losses are real, and I'm not going to dress them up as gifts. But I kept my daughter. I kept her trust. I kept the part of her that still writes in journals, by the way. She got a new one, a better lock, and she keeps the key in a different spot now that she's decided is secret. She told me once, a few months after everything, that she thinks it's important to write things down even if it feels scary. "Why?" I asked. She thought about it. "Because then you have proof of what actually happened," she said, "even if it's just for yourself." She's 9. She figured that out on her own. I'm still not okay with what Megan did. I'm still not okay with Doreen's response, or the way the room laughed, or the 2 weeks it took Curtis to get there. Those things happened and they don't unhappen. But I have my daughter, whole and known and still willing to trust me with the small serious things. And Megan knows now that I will pick up the phone and call a lawyer before she finishes her next sentence. That's enough. For today, it's enough. The thing nobody tells you about standing up for your child is how lonely it feels in the moment. You're in a room full of people and you are completely alone, and every face around you is either laughing or waiting to see if you'll back down. I didn't back down. And living with the aftermath of that choice has taught me more about who I actually am than almost anything else in my life. I think about cause and effect a lot now, Not in a mystical way, just in the plain, honest sense that what we do to people doesn't disappear. It lands somewhere. Megan read Zoe's diary out loud because she thought there would be no cost. She had spent years testing that theory on me, and I had let her. Every time I swallowed a comment, every time I told myself it wasn't worth the fight, I was confirming her belief that cruelty was free. The day I put my hand over that journal and said, "Stop," that was the day the math changed. Not because I was righteous, but because I was finally honest about what was actually happening. What I keep coming back to is Zoe. Not the crying version of her in that kitchen, but the version who, months later, told me she still writes in her journal because it helps her remember what really happened. She's 9. She already understands something it took me years to learn, that clarity is a form of self-respect, that knowing your own experience, keeping your own record, refusing to let someone else narrate your life for you. That's not sensitivity. That's intelligence. Real intelligence. The kind that protects you. I also think about what it cost me to do the right thing slowly. Curtis took 2 weeks to fully get there. 2 weeks where I had to hold all of it mostly alone. I'm not angry at him for that anymore. He had to dismantle a lifetime of minimizing before he could see clearly. But I notice that the people who act with integrity quickly, without needing to be convinced, are the people who have been practicing it quietly for a long time. Integrity isn't a decision you make in a crisis. It's a habit you build before the crisis arrives and all the small moments where it would have been easier to look away. And then there's the question of what it takes to keep going when the outcome isn't what you wanted. Megan didn't go to jail. Doreen didn't apologize. The family didn't hold a meeting and decide to do better. What I got was a signed document, a daughter who still trusts me, and a marriage that is harder and more honest than it was before. That's it. That's the whole result. Some days it feels like enough. Some days I'm still angry. But here's what I know. Zoe watched me refuse to accept that what happened to her was okay. She watched me make calls, write things down, spend money I hadn't planned to spend, and hold a firm line even when everyone around me was telling me I was overreacting. She watched me do all of that without screaming, without crumbling, without walking away from my own life. And now she keeps her journal key on a ribbon around her wrist, and she still writes in it every night. That's the inheritance I actually want to leave her, not a perfect family. Not a story where every wrong gets righted and everyone learns their lesson. Just the knowledge, bone deep, lived in, real, that when someone hurts you, you are allowed to say so. You are allowed to act. You are allowed to keep going even when the world doesn't hand you the ending you deserved. She already knows it. I'm just making sure she doesn't forget.